Hello, everyone. So, 25 years ago, we met the Baudelaires on Briny Beach, shortly after their parents had perished in a terrible fire. And I am terribly sorry to say that this was just the beginning of their misfortunes. Over the course of 13 wickedly wonderful books, Violet, the inventor, Klaus, the reader, and Sunny, the biter, had to contend with all manner of obstacles. There were lions and lumber mills, hospitals and harpoons. There were many angry mobs and one deeply untalented tap dancer. All the while, they were pursued by Count Olaf, an actor who was awful in every sense of the word. But while the Baudelaires' lives went from bad to worse, their creator enjoyed one staggering success after another. Our guest today has sold over 70 million books in over 40 languages. His work has been translated into film, theater, and television. But perhaps his greatest achievement is the fact that his books have opened the doors of literature for whole generations of children who might not have otherwise taken up reading, of which I was certainly one. My name is Jack Meggitt-Phillips, and I am the author of The Beast and the Bethany books. It is my horrifying honor and my petrifying privilege to introduce our guest, Daniel Handler, a.k.a. Lemony Snicket.
Hello. Hello, it is a pleasure to see almost everyone here. Hello. That was a very charming introduction.
Oh, thank you
You're
very
good
much.
at this.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be blushing scarlet. So 25 years, how does that feel as a sort of milestone to hit?
It's too many years, I think. 25, it's a lot. Who here is older than 25? See, hardly anyone. Hardly anyone lives that long. Yeah, it's very terrible and unnerving and surprising, and I wait for the day that I will cease to be amazed, but it doesn't come. I travel very far. I do not live here in Dubai. I live in California, which is not even the same country. It's a different place. And I've come very far. I was in a cabin very much like the cabin that was just shown us on Emirates Air. I came very far, and I don't know anyone here in Dubai, and yet I meet people who are familiar with books for which I am supposedly responsible. It's quite bewildering, and also a kind of delight, but mostly bewildering.
So to take back to sort of the bewildering beginning, when did the idea for the series first begin for you?
Well, I think when I was a child, I enjoyed thinking about terrible things happening. Like many people who live in America, I was not, my people are not indigenous to America. They fled from other circumstances to come to America. My father's family fled Germany. And so I grew up hearing stories about what it was like to flee when things have been terrible, what it was like to live under the shadow of something terrifying happening. And I think that made me enjoy thinking about terrible things. So I would walk around thinking, I wonder if this bridge will collapse right now. Or it looks like a harmless bird, but what if it's a flesh-eating bird and it has a bunch of friends, hungry friends. So in some senses, I think I began to think about that. You must have thought about terrible things when you were young as well.
Oh, yes, no, I'm a constantly anxious person. I was thinking all the terrible things that could happen as I came on the stage, and none of them have happened yet. So
not yet. No, it's
we'll
only
see.
been a few minutes, though.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
As a child, did you enjoy reading these sort of gothic, terrible books as well?
I enjoyed reading any book in which something terrible was going to happen, or it seemed like something terrible was going to happen. In fact, when I was a child, I read a book called The Moffats, which is written by an American, Eleanor Estes, and in the Moffats is a family, and all of the children in the Moffats get on a streetcar, and they're going to go to the beach. and another streetcar is coming on the same track in the opposite direction, which is not how streetcars are supposed to work. But sometimes things go wrong, which is when the story gets interesting. And in that story, I thought for a moment that the Moffats were going to get hit by the opposite streetcar, and that even though the book was not anywhere near the end, that halfway through the book, all of the people would be killed in a streetcar accident. And I was very curious about how the rest of the book might continue. It does not do that. They avoid the accident.
Oh,
but I think that at an influence on a series of unfortunate events in which the Baudelaires take a streetcar to the beach and then something terrible happens.
Yes. I've seen you sort of talk about how when you love a book when you're 10 years old, it is unlike anything else. Why do you think that the books that we first read are the most important ones?
I think we have a lot of time to think about them. I think we hold them dear, and we get to wander around thinking, maybe I'm kind of the hero of this story, or maybe the story is happening to someone I know. Wouldn't it be interesting if the hero had a friend, and that friend was me? And you begin to wander around, living in that space in which you're kind of in a book and you're kind of in real life. You're kind of having a ghastly adventure, and then you're kind of hopefully safe in your everyday circumstances. And I think that's a beautiful place to be in. I think that's why we invented literature festivals, so people could come together and think about the space that happens when you read a story, that when you enjoy yourself.
And when did you start sort of moving from being a reader of terrible things to sort of writing your own things?
I was writing at a very young age. My parents, who aren't here, so I can talk about them freely. Many of you are here with your parents, so you can't talk about them, but my parents aren't here, so I can talk about them openly. My parents tell a story that when I was 6 years old, someone asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said that I wanted to be a wise man who lived at the top of a mountain giving advice. Now, if that story is true, and I have my doubts, because my parents, who aren't here, so I can talk about them openly, are not always entirely truthful in their stories about me. I bet that's familiar. Has anyone here been the subject of a story that your parents tell you about that is not true? It's okay, many of you are here with your parents, so you can't raise your hands, it'll put you in danger. But the answer is all of you. And so if that story is true, then apparently I wanted to be something else. But I don't remember wanting to be an old man who lived at the top of a mountain giving advice. I remember wanting to be a writer. I liked little notebooks. I liked writing things down. I liked thinking about how I make a book that was boring better. I thought, oh, I wish I had written some of these books that I admired very much. Yes. I very much wanted to be a writer. And I had a lovely library near me. Not as lovely as the library that is across the water here. That's a remarkably lovely library in which Mr. Meggitt-Phillips and I spent a couple of hours yesterday.
We were playing hide and seek. I kept on sort of chasing him, and he kept on saying, please leave me alone. I only want to speak to you on stage.
I didn't know we were going to say that. Yes, in that case, that's been happening for days. Yes. But I also got to sit in your library and do some work, and it felt wonderful. But we had a lovely library, not as lovely, but lovely in my neighborhood growing up. And I went there all the time, and they had some writers visit and teach classes. And so I got to learn a little bit from writers, even when I was very young. That was an exciting opportunity.
Have you ever read any of the things that you wrote as a child?
Yes, they're not as good as I remember them being. But that's okay. I was learning. I also had terrible handwriting. I still have terrible handwriting. Who here has terrible handwriting? It's a wonderful feeling, isn't it? No one can read what you wrote, including you sometimes. And when I was in 6th grade, I had a handwriting teacher, Ms. Udell, who is also not here, so we may talk about her openly.
Oh, Miss Udell, lovely to see you. My goodness. Oh, thanks for coming along.
No, that was someone else.
To make the journey.
Thank goodness. And Ms. Udell said, oh, you want to be a writer? Well, if you don't improve your handwriting, no one will ever read what you wrote. She was wrong, Ms. Udell. She was terribly wrong. And the printing press had already been invented, believe it or not, during my childhood. Ms. Udell, what's wrong with you? Why would you tell a young man that? But the important thing is that it didn't affect me, and I hardly ever think about it, and I certainly don't speak about it bitterly years and years later.
For any sort of young authors we might have here with possibly terrible handwriting, do you have any advice for how they should go about becoming
First of
writers?
all, don't work on improving your handwriting. It's probably too late. It can't get much better. You should and then what I enjoy doing as a writer is I carry a notebook with me wherever I go. I don't know why I had to take it out of my pocket. You know what a notebook looks like. I like a notebook that looks like this. You like a bigger notebook.
I like a bigger notebook. It makes me feel grand. And
I like a little notebook so it can stay in my pocket. And I wander around my life, and when I remember something, or when somebody says something interesting to me, or when I'm reading something and I like it, I write it down in my notebook, and my notebook helps me keep it in my mind and think about it, and possibly turn some of those things into a book. Also, I think a very important part of being a writer is eavesdropping, which means listening, particularly when you're young, listening to what adults are saying. It's a lot of fun. And here is my advice on eavesdropping, which is before you start, think of an excuse if you get caught. You won't always get caught, but you will get caught sometimes, and you want to have your excuse ready. So if, say, you are outside a closed door where you are listening to adults talking, you bring a small object with you. This is what a small object looks like. And you drop it on the floor. I did this all the time when I was a child. You drop it on the floor, and then if they say, I was in the middle of having a fascinating argument with my spouse, but now I've heard a noise outside that sounds like a little boy, they will open the door, and then you can say, oh, I was just picking up this top of a water thing. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you discussing that kidnapping you're planning. So eavesdropping and excuse making are important parts of being a writer.
What are some of the things you've written recently in your notebook? Sorry,
I don't think I should share it.
That's a man's
I don't think I
private
should
business.
share it. No,
it was rude of me to ask, really.
Yeah, and
sorry about
it's not all flattering things about you.
So when you went about getting your books first sort of published, how was that as an experience, sort of working on sort of writing your books and then sort of trying to take it out into the world?
Well, it was very embarrassing for me because I had an idea for some books for young people, and the idea was terrible things happening to children over and over again. And so I explained this to an editor. I would like to write books in which terrible things are happening over and over again to children. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I thought, I can't believe I've said this to someone. Not only will they not agree to publish these books, but they will have me arrested or something. But they didn't. They were all affixed with some kind of hypnosis that made them not do that. And when the first two books were published, I was taken to the city of Lansing, Michigan. The city of Lansing, Michigan is not here, so we can talk about it openly. I don't like it there. I don't recommend going. I can't think of a single thing it has in common with Dubai. And I was taken to a room much larger than this one with many, 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 many chairs. And there were two people who had come to hear about these books. They were both adults, and they sat in the back.
Well,
it was like
generous,
an anxiety dream. It was like when you dream that you forgot to wear your clothing when you go to school, or some other dream like that. I thought, am I dreaming that no one likes my books? No, it's real life. No one likes them. And I talked about them as best as I could, and then the two adults came up and they said, we have read your book, we hate it, and we just had to see what kind of monster, they said this to another human being, what kind of monster is responsible for them. And so I thought, well, this is just how it's going to go. It's exactly what I thought when I said out loud to a publisher, I have an idea, terrible things happening to children. So I was almost instantly punished.
I like it. You said that when children started really taking to the series, they liked it in just the right way. What were some of your sort of first interactions like with Baudelaire superfans?
Well, I don't know if they were superfans, but I got to meet people who I recognize I recognize a kinship with, which is the reason that I go to a festival like this, is that I meet other people who I know are very interested in books. And so I would meet young people, and they would tell me that they were worried about the Baudelaires. And I thought that that was a very good thing to think about. You get worried about the characters in books that you admire. And so then I thought, oh, someone's admiring this book. Because if you don't admire the book, you say, I don't care what happens to you. You know when you read a tedious book, and it says, uh-oh, they're in trouble, and you think, I don't care. But with the Baudelaires, people were getting worried about them. And so I liked the idea that I was spreading worry and anxiety and meeting worried and anxious companions. And that's why I go to a literary festival and I see other writers who are worried. The other evening I got to hear some wonderful poets read. I enjoy poetry a lot, but does anyone here know a poet personally? Well, then you know they're anxious and depressed people. So it was wonderful to spend an evening. I think there were 7 poets who performed, and they were all anxious and depressed. Some of them were so upset that I didn't understand a word they were saying, although admittedly they were also speaking a language that I don't speak. But the important thing was that I found that literature was part of a center of worry and anxiety.
Well, I think that's
which I enjoy.
That's what makes Lemony Snicket as narrator so fantastic, is his sort of constant state of anxiety and sort of theatrical sadness, I suppose. Where did he come from as the idea as the narrator for the books?
You're asking me where I got the idea of an unreliable, melodramatic person worrying over much about literature?
I just can't
someone
see where
I
it came
knew,
from.
someone I met. I liked the idea that the narrator could be helpless. That seemed like a good thing to do, because I feel helpless all of the time. I see terrible things happening, and there's nothing I can do about them.
And the name, Lemony Snicket, it really rolls off the tongue.
Thank you. I've always actually been puzzled by that phrase, rolls off the tongue. It sounds terrible. It sounds like a phrase you shouldn't say in front of young people. It rolls off the tongue. Ugh, why are we talking about people's tongues? Yes, you're demonstrating your tongue to me now. I feel exactly the same way. I was researching a book that I wrote for adults. It is my first novel for adults. It was published also 25 years ago. It is called The Basic 8. It is about a girl in high school who has a crush. Are we allowed to say that on stage? She has a crush on a boy. The boy is not interested in her, and so she bludgeons him to death with a croquet mallet. It's a comedy. And part of the research that I was doing, part of what happens in the book is that after she bludgeons the boy with a croquet mallet, some people in the media take an interest in her. And and some ridiculous organizations take interest in her. And so I was calling ridiculous organizations and asking them if they would mail me their ridiculous brochures so I could read them and put my favorite parts in a notebook, and then they would turn out to be in a novel. And I was on the phone with a woman from a ridiculous organization, and she said, of course, we will send you our materials. What is your name? And I thought, I don't think I want to give my real name to the ridiculous organization. Who knows what they'll do with it? Something ridiculous and sinister, maybe. I thought, say another name, I thought to myself. Just say another name. And I said something, which was the phrase, Lemony Snicket. She said, what is your name? And I said, Lemony Snicket. And then there was a pause. And during the pause, I thought, why did I say that? All I had to say was something that wasn't my name. That was the only part of the parlor game. Say something that's not your name. And I said Lemony Snicket. And I thought, no one is ridiculous enough to think that that's a real name. But I forgot that I was talking to someone from a ridiculous organization. And so she said, is that spelled how it sounds? And I said, yes. And then I said, read that back to me. Because I had no idea how it sounded like it was spelled. And so she read it back to me. And so she, not just me, but she, as is often with the creation of someone, it takes a man and a woman. That is how Lemony Snicket was born, a little bit. Was a name. And then it was a name that I had a lot of fun with. I had a job at the time. Does anyone here have a job? then you know how terrible it is. No one likes a job, and I didn't like my job either. See, we brought up a job, and immediately someone got so upset they have to leave the tent. Jobs are terrible. And I had a job, and I was not enjoying myself. Oh, thank you. Thank you, a little gin. It's just water. I was not enjoying myself, and so I made up a hobby for my job, which was that I would type letters. My job had ridiculous newspapers come to the job, tiny neighborhood newspapers in San Francisco, and I would read the newspapers, and I would choose the most harmless article in them, and then I would write on a typewriter an angry letter to the editor about the article. They would say, we're having a parade on Wednesday. And I would say, a parade on Wednesday? That's outrageous. And I would sign it Lemony Snicket. And I would hope that someone would write back to me, and they never did. And so I had this name, and then some friends of mine gave me for my birthday some business cards that said Lemony Snicket on them. And I began to give them out when I would go to cafes and bars. I would say, hello, I am Lemony Snicket. And to make up something about Lemony Snicket, I said that I was a yacht lawyer, which was a phrase that I had heard before, yacht lawyer. It sounded professional, yacht lawyer. I said, yes, I'm a yacht lawyer. And they would say, what is that? And I would say, I deal in international waters mostly. That sounded like a phrase that I knew. And I would say, sometimes when there's a conflict over a yacht, someone has to speak up for the interests of the yacht. Not for the people involved, but for the yacht. And in this way, I was not only found ridiculous and sinister at work, but also in my social life. And so when I began to write about terrible things happening to young people, and I thought I want a narrator who is not reliable, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to use this name that I've been lying around? And then the strange thing is that I still see these friends who gave me those business cards, and they still say to me, I can't believe that your whole job is basically that business card that we gave you many years ago. How did that happen?
How does that feel, having Lemony Snicket sort of become this phenomenon now?
It's very strange. I wait for it not to be strange. I approached this beautiful synagogue, and the sign outside said, meet Lemony Snicket, and I thought, this is so funny. I also thought, I got a little excited. I thought, oh, I get to meet Lemony Snicket. And then I thought, no, you don't. No one does. It's disappointing, you see? It's the anxiety and worry that we all feel at a literary festival. It's so exciting. Many people don't read at all, and they don't get as worried and anxious as we do. We're a secret society of people who can't stop worrying about the world because we keep reading. We connect with each other across the continents. We're part of a glorious tradition of people who are very upset and helpless. It's exciting.
Well, one of the things I absolutely love about the series is this sort of secret organization in the books, the VFD, where basically sort of readers who feel woeful about the world.
Yeah. Well, I think we all feel that way. We who are readers, and I say we because we're all here at a literary festival. You know that feeling when you're carrying a book with you and then you see someone else who has a book, maybe a good book, and you have a brief shared glance, even if you don't get to talk to them, and you think, we both know that the world is so frightening and upsetting that we must take solace in the transcribed consciousness of people that have happened for thousands of years. We're part of the secret society. It's been going on so long. And so much of it started in this area of the world, which is one of the pleasures, I think, for me, as an outsider, of visiting this area of the world, is knowing the vast literary culture that bubbled up here that we in America like to take advantage of.
With the sort of fame that came with, and the success of the series, adaptations shortly followed. What was it like seeing your work sort of adapted for the film? Let's start with.
I feel that you ask me questions and my answer is always the same, which is strange. It feels strange. The first time that I saw my work being adapted, they said, come on out to this place where we have built a lake. So part of the film of a series of unfortunate events takes advantage of the wide window, which takes place near a lake. Now, this was made in Hollywood. In Hollywood, they think to themselves, oh, something takes place in a lake, we should build a lake. Normal people say, let's go to a lake. Like if you said to yourself, I'd like to take a walk by the shores of a lake today, someone would say, well, let's look where a lake is and see if we can go there. Not in Hollywood. In Hollywood, they say, let's build a lake. So they built a lake in what they kept referring to as an abandoned airplane factory. It wasn't abandoned, it was full of people, and they were building a lake. And I got to go there, and no one paid the least bit attention to me because they were all digging and running around building a lake. It was a very strange experience. I wanted to say, you guys are working too hard. I just said it had to be a lake. You didn't have to build a lake here in this abandoned airplane factory, but they did. They built a lake. Why would you do such a thing?
It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
With the TV series, you were more involved in the writing of it. What are the main differences for when you're sort of telling a story on the page and on the screen?
I think on the screen you have to, that you can see so much there. What I love about literature is that you bring your own mind to it. No matter how descriptive a book is, you're things you imagine. And I think that's very exciting. I think in a visual medium, even with illustrations, you begin to go along the lines of the imagination of the illustrator, and in a film, you're taken into that world. And so you have to kind of think about that a lot. And also, writing a book is something that you mostly do alone, or occasionally you might do it at one end of the table, and your companion might do it at the other end of the table in a beautiful library. But we didn't collaborate. We both worked at the library. And but for film, when you have to build a lake, you have a bunch of lake builders. You have all these people, and so everyone's working on it together. And so for the television show, for instance, there was a handful of writers. They were all lovely. They were playwrights. None of them had written for television before. And we sat around my dining room table. I would cook lunch for them. That felt like the least I could do. I mean, they were also paid, but I cooked lunch for them. And we talked about the best way to adapt these books for television, and we had a lot of fun. Yes. I had a contest with a cash prize for the best literary reference that someone could sneak into a script. It was won by Sigrid Gilmer for sneaking in a reference to The Lottery, a creepy story by Shirley Jackson that is referenced in one of the scripts. And we had a wonderful time, but it was collaborative. And I wasn't used to collaborating. I wasn't used to having strangers at my dining room table helping me with the story. But it was an interesting experience.
Do you like the solitude of writing, or do you like
I do. I like to be alone, but actually I like to be alone but with other people nearby, if you know what I mean. So that I write a lot in libraries, and I write a lot in coffee shops where there are other people around, but they're not paying attention to me, hopefully.
So the latest iteration of a series of unfortunate events are these beautiful new covers, the 25th anniversary ones by Emily Gravett.
Yes.
They're handsome ones, aren't they?
They're quite handsome. I've admired the work of Emily Gravett for quite some time, and so some people, the publisher said, it's been 25 years, and I said, stop saying that, it makes me feel old. And they said, no, what we mean is, we would like someone new to do the covers. And I said, how about Emily Gravett, please, Emily Gravett, please? And they said, okay, we'll ask her. And she got right to work, and then I went to London. She lives in Wales, where you're from.
Yes, yes.
Oh, people, fans of Wales.
Bring on the Welsh,
oh.
Yes. The
Thank you.
Starts
I'm
here.
so glad the Welsh cheerleading squad was here. I was worried that I would have to sing the praises of Wales by myself.
I bring them everywhere I go. It's a good one. Yeah.
And so I sat in the lobby of the publishing house. They said, in a moment, someone will come and fetch you, but for here will you sit in the lobby? And I sat down next to this woman, and we were both sitting there. And then I said, oh, good morning. What are you here for? And she said, oh, I'm meeting with Lemony Snicket. What are you here for? And I said, I'm meeting with Emily Gravett. And she said, well, I am Emily Gravett. And I said, well, I have some bad news for you. And so she drew these marvelous things. Right here, from here I can't see them very well. Maybe, can you see them better? They look blurry here. Maybe it's all the gin that Mr. Meggitt-Phillips has been giving me. No, so they're lovely. But 25 years, yes, it's a 25-year anniversary. Happy anniversary to 3 children having terrible things happen to them over and over again. They have terrible things happen to them in 13 volumes, and it's been going on for 25 years. It's a wonder they're still children, but they are.
Brilliant. How closely do you like to work with illustrators across sort of other books, or do you sort of leave them to it?
Well, I'm married to an illustrator. I am married to the illustrator Lisa Brown, and she and I have collaborated on a few books, and 1 child, and a household. But when you're married to an illustrator, one thing that you hear a lot is the illustrator complaining about other authors. Saying, oh, this author told me what to do. Authors don't know anything. And I say, yes, of course, darling, of course you are right. And I think to myself, remember, don't boss around the illustrator. So when I meet with an illustrator, I say, you know what you want? That looks lovely. That's what I say. Brett Helquist, who illustrated most editions of A Series of Unfortunate Events, he and I had barely any contact with each other, and that seemed to work marvelously. I've also collaborated with an illustrator named Myra Kalman a lot. She and I love to work together. We go over to her studio, and she serves a very strong tea, and we get really caffeinated and excited, and she has a piano, and so I start playing the piano, which is not helpful, but a lot of fun. And then we'll have a 3-hour meeting, and at the end of it, we'll say, we forgot to talk about the book, and then we'll talk about the book for 5 minutes.
But it's a very caffeinated, intense 5 minutes, so I think that would work.
I think so. I don't remember it. Yes. Yeah, but that's our method. You see why it's better than having a job.
Do you ever find yourself wondering what the Baudelaires are up to now?
All the time. What are they up to now, I wonder?
I wonder, yes.
I think about it. I take notes about it in a notebook. Maybe there'll be more information about them published, or maybe there won't be. I don't know.
Well, that is very
Anything
exciting
can happen.
Yes.
We're near a body of water. I could drown this afternoon, and then there would be nothing more. I won't, though. Maybe I will.
Well, they're building a lake for you right now. So in the
Well,
hope
to get
that,
to the library, we
yes.
took a boat several times.
Yes.
We took a boat, and there are life jackets on the boat, and I like when there are life jackets on the boat, not only because if you need a life jacket, there'll be one, but it reminds you that you might die. You get on the boat, and they say, here's a life jacket, and you think, life. This might be the last boat I'm on. And it wasn't, though. They're handsome boats. Hats off to the boats of Dubai.
Well, in a moment, you'll have your chance to ask your own questions to Daniel, but while you're thinking about those, I've brought a series of unfortunate questions.
Oh, no, okay.
Yes. So, in your books, someone's eaten alive by lions, someone else eaten by leeches.
Yeah.
Which would you prefer, lions or leeches?
I think leeches would take longer.
Yes, I think that would be horrible.
So I think lions.
Yes.
Also, whenever I've been in danger, which is not that often, I think to myself, at least this will be a good story. And I think if you were eaten by lions, you know, if someone said, what happened to Handler? Well, he was eaten by lions. I think people would have a nice time with that. Whereas leeches, I think they would just get sad. Not that long ago, I was swimming, not here in this waterway, which doesn't seem like a swimmer's paradise, but I was swimming in the San Francisco Bay, and a sea lion rose out of the water and looked at me. And I thought, this will be a good story. It'll be a good story.
Would you rather never be able to read a new book or never be able to reread something you've already read?
Oh, no. Why are you asking such horrible questions? I need to know more about this hypothetical situation. How has this happened to me? Have they destroyed all of the old books?
It's like either you can live a sort of post-apocalyptic landscape where somehow you can download the books you've already read from your brain into books, or every book that you've already read has been sort of destroyed as a punishment to you, personally. Sorry, that's a bit of a nasty question, actually.
It's a horrible question.
In my defense, you know, as a reader of the Snicket books, I spent so many of my nights tossing and turning, thinking about the Baudelaires, that I feel like a little bit of punishment is only fair.
Oh, I see. It's personal.
Yes, yes.
I always liked you until now. I don't know. I think there's something so lovely about rereading. Mm-hmm. And I've read a lot of books, and so that could sustain me, but I would be very upset. And I don't like thinking of post-apocalyptic landscape.
That's very
I don't
good.
like that at all. Could we still have a nice landscape?
Yes.
Or would it have to be full of rubble and skulls?
I think you can design your post-apocalypse if you like. There we go.
Okay,
That
thank
makes
you,
things a
yes.
bit nicer. But,
Yeah.
yes. And finally,
Mine's full of charming restaurants.
which Guardian from the series Unfortunate Events series would you most like to live with?
Oh. Never been asked that question.
Oh. Get in. Yes.
It would be fun to kind of visit all of them for a short period of time, but that's a cop-out answer. I think I'll go with Kit Snicket.
Yes.
She's kind of a guardian.
Is Kit based on your own sister, or is she?
No, although I have a lovely sister. Kit Snicket is inspired by a writer named Kit Reed, who is no longer with us, but who taught me at university. And she was a really, really wonderful teacher. And she made me read all kinds of things. I would work on something and she would say, no, go and read something by Muriel Spark. And I would say, which book by Muriel Spark? And she would look at me exhausted and say, 4 or 5 books by Muriel Spark. Go read them. And it was a wonderful education. And she was some of the first, she would always read a new book of mine right away when it came out. And so the first time that I mentioned Kit Snicket, I was so happy because I knew she would have a jolt of delight, and she did.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, let's have some questions from the audience. Has anyone got
questions from
something
the
they'd like
audience.
to ask? Okay, I shall descend in among. Let's have a look.
Jack's leaving.
So, what is your question?
Who was your inspiration for Count Olaf?
Who is my inspiration for Count Olaf? Have you ever met anyone terrible? Yes, you have. You've met quite a few terrible people. Yeah, that's what I think. I try to think of all of the terrible people in my life all of the time. You never stop thinking about them. Remember when I brought up Ms. Udell? That was so long ago, and I still think about her all the time. So I think the way you think about terrible people, and you keep them kind of in a heap in your mind, that's what I did. I kept them in a heap in my mind, and I thought about terrible people.
And let's go for you.
Why did you choose to end your stories on
Why did I choose to end them?
kind of continuation?
Oh, why did each volume end at a moment of suspense? Oh, the last one. Why did I choose to end that book in that particular way? Was that what you're asking? I thought it would be interesting because I like, when I'm done with a book, I like a book that ends with a question or two rather than an answer. I like to wander around thinking about a book and thinking, oh, there's space for me to think about it rather than to tell everybody what happened. That part seems boring to me.
I think the series is so well plotted. How far in advance did you plan the books, or was it sort of...
I would plan them and then I would move them around. Part of my writing method is that I put little scraps of something that I want in a story on index cards. So my house is full of index cards that I'm always arranging in different order. I'm often arranging them on the dining room table, which leads to an exciting conversation with the illustrator Lisa Brown, to whom I'm married, about what is a dining room table for? Some people say it's for eating. Other people say it's for moving around index cards.
Which of the books got moved around the most, sort of?
Many of them. Yeah, a lot of them. The Slippery Slope got moved around a lot. The Ersatz elevator got moved around a lot. Yeah, they all moved around a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
I like to surprise myself. Oh, now we have a volunteer. There are wonderful volunteers here at the festival. I don't know, as you peruse around the festival, be sure and say to the volunteers, thank you for volunteering, because they're doing a wonderful job.
Where did you get the idea for the settings in the books?
Where did I get the idea for the settings in the books? By traveling, by going places I've never been. Perhaps a book will be set in something that reminds me of Dubai, following my travels in Dubai. It would have to have aggressive topiary. I went to one of your gardens. with a big elephant made of topia. Two elephants.
Two elephants.
Two elephants, two horses.
Two horses. There were a lot of Smurfs around.
A lot of Smurfs, an animal that I hadn't thought of in a while.
I think they are the main thing that are missing from any sort of garden is bring in some more Smurfs and it sort of makes the world feel right.
So aggressive topiary, which has not really been in a book of mine.
Were there any settings that you couldn't get to work for the Baudelaire's?
No, but some of them were more challenging than others.
Yeah.
For the Slippery Slope, for instance, I read a lot about snow because I live in California where we don't have much of it. I read a lovely book called Snow in America, which is the history of snow in America. It was quite wonderful to read.
Alrighty, let's have another question from... Yep.
Was Mr. Poe ever evil or was he actually good?
Was Mr. Poe ever evil or was he actually good? I like that question all the time. Don't we all think about it with ourselves? We say, I hope I'm actually good, even though I've done these things that I wish I hadn't done. I hope I'm actually good. I think it's particularly hard if you're in the financial industry. Am I being actually good? I hope I'm being actually good, or am I evil? I don't know, what do you think? Do you think he's actually good? The word actually is so wonderful to put there. Well said.
I don't think he's good because he never tried to help the Baudelaires, in my opinion.
He tried to help them, so that means he's not good?
Yeah, like...
Fascinating.
We've actually got our own budding Count Olaf over there who feels like that, Baudelaire should have been vanquished. Well, I think that's something that worked really well in the series, seeing the Baudelaires go from this, in a lot of children's books, they're the heroes and the villains and that sort of blurring of the lines. And that sort of happened later in the series. Was that somewhere you always wanted to take it, or did it just sort of happen more organically?
I was interested in how miserable things happen. And nobody wants a miserable thing to happen, but they keep on happening. And then sometimes we feel like we did something terrible. Who here has done something terrible? All of you!
Okay, let's go for you there. Got the microphone coming up.
Oh.
Any of the other characters based on real people?
I like that question so much because what if the answer were no? I don't pay attention to any people I meet. No. But the answer is, of course, yes. When I meet people, I take notes on them and I think about them. So one of the reasons that I didn't, for instance, want to read out loud anything from my notebook is that I've been at the festival recently. This was a new notebook that I got just for my trip to Dubai. And I've been taking notes on all sorts of people that I've met. And I didn't want to make it sound like I was insulting them, but I was noticing things about them and thinking, I wonder if I can put that someplace. So yes, none of you are safe. When you meet me, I might take notes on you, and you might find your elbow or a word that you said or the way you toss your hair in a book.
Out of the Baudelaires, I would imagine Klaus is the closest to you, or is that not the case?
I wish Klaus were closest to me. I wish that I could retain useful information from books, but I only retain things that I like.
Okay, let's have you here. Microphone come up.
Yes, volunteer, run, run!
How old were you when you started writing books?
When I started writing books, when I was writing The Basic 8, I was 23 years old. But before that, I don't know it depends what you mean. That was a book that was published by a publishing house. Before that, I was writing many things that I would staple together and give to my friends. And they would say, this doesn't count as a gift. It doesn't count as a gift.
What were those first staple stories about?
I mean, kind of about whatever occurred to me. At that office job, I found a piece of paper in my desk, and it was the word meat was typed on it. M-E-A-T, meat. And it was underlined. And so I wrote a play called Meat. I just put that in the typewriter. It already had meat at the top. And I wrote a short play, and I made copies of it, and I stapled it together. And I remember to this day my friend Mattathias, whose name appears in one of the books, he said to me, this doesn't count as a present. It was his birthday. I said, I have a play for you called Meat. And he said, that doesn't count as a present.
All right, we'll have two more questions.
Two more questions?
We'll have one. Let's go right at the back. Yeah, back row, yeah. Thank you.
So, as an adult who read these books as a kid, I'm actually kind of concerned how many adults told me to read it. How does that make you feel?
You're concerned that so many adults told you to read these books?
When I was a kid, I was
When you were a
like
kid.
9 when I started reading the books.
Who were these adults?
My English teacher?
Oh, okay.
I was told I don't read
So
enough.
it wasn't just adults in the street or something.
No.
That would be alarming. And where were you at this time?
Abu Dhabi, actually.
Sorry?
Abu Dhabi,
Oh,
right
in
next
Abu
door.
Dhabi. And so you were, and your English teacher told you to read these books.
I wasn't reading enough.
You
My
weren't
English
reading
grade
enough.
wasn't great.
You weren't reading enough according to your English teacher. I mean, no one reads enough according to their English teacher. If you read all day long, your English teacher will still say, what about the nighttime? Why aren't you reading at night? And you want to know how I feel about those adults telling you to read those books.
I mean to say how many adults recommend the books to young kids.
It's irresponsible, obviously. But I think what happens is that often if you read a book by Lemony Snicket when you're a child, you grow up to be a troubled adult. And I'm grateful that you called attention to yourself so that the young people in the audience look at that person. If you read Lemony Snicket books, you could end up like that person. Still haunted by her English teacher years
I'm a
and years
third-year
later.
law student. I'm not that bad.
She's a law student. I rest my case. Do you want to grow up to be a law student?
And I believe you're studying to be a yacht lawyer, so it's a real influence there. All right, let's have
Someone's got to speak up for the yachts.
final question. No pressure whatsoever.
All right, so remember the final question has to bring together all of the themes that we've been discussing. And for those of you who are raising your hands who will not be called on, which is almost all of you, I will shortly be at a table where I will be signing books. And if you want to ask your questions there, you don't have to have a book with you. You can just get in line and ask a question, and I will do my best to answer it, although, as you've noticed, I'm not very good at it.
Well, there's a child who seems to have grown in height over the course of the event. Started sitting down and slowly the event going rising,
I don't know how to break it to
rising.
you, but actually
So,
most children increase in height.
What? Oh my goodness, I
Yeah.
was born this tall. So let's go for you there.
What a difficult labor that must have been.
So in Uncle Monty's reptile room,
Yes.
I've come to concern that the word herpetology is not just a study of snakes, it's a study of reptiles and amphibians all together.
Yes, it is true. So many people have said that to me. They've said, why do you just say it's the study of snakes? It's also reptiles and amphibians. And then I feel ashamed of myself. And I think no matter how far I go from home, no matter what tents I hide away in, people find me and tell me that I'm wrong. Just when I would want to say, thank you so much for coming, thank you for inviting me to the festival, instead I am brought down in shame. Shame on me.
Daniel Handler, aka Lemony Snicket. Well, the wonderful Daniel will be doing an event for adults tomorrow. If any children would like to come and see more children events, and that's coming up, I'll be doing an event tomorrow as well. We just want to thank a few people before you all race for the door. Thank the audience, thank the AV team, volunteers, our title sponsor, Emirates Airline, our founding partner, Dubai Culture, our parent organisation, the Emirates Literary Foundation, and our session sponsor, Dubai Duty Free. Thank you so much, everyone, and head for the signing table.